The lights were already up, washing the stage in purple and white, when Prince stepped forward and said nothing. The microphone stood inches from his mouth, untouched. The guitar hung low against his torso, cable coiled like a question mark at his feet. According to audience accounts, the silence stretched on for minutes, long enough to feel intentional, long enough to feel confrontational. The turning point object was right there in his hands, the guitar, unplayed, waiting. Thousands of people held their breath. This was the moment where a concert could slip, where control could be lost, where the crowd might turn restless. Prince didn't move. Freeze it there. A sold-out venue, a global icon. No words, no sound. Just a man on stage, letting silence do the work. Weeks earlier, the conditions for that silence had been set. The anchor detail was the tour itself, structured tightly after a period of intense scrutiny. Prince had been dealing with shifting industry pressures, contract disputes resurfacing in headlines, questions about relevance whispered by commentators who mistook quiet for retreat. The rules of the world he was walking into were familiar. Artists were expected to explain themselves, to narrate their own value, to perform even between songs. Silence was read as weakness. Prince knew that rule. He planned to break it. At rehearsals, days before the show, musicians noticed something different. The anchor detail was instruction, or the lack of it. Prince focused on transitions, on spacing, on moments between notes rather than the notes themselves. According to insiders, he ran the band through endings repeatedly, then stopped them before sound could resolve. He was practicing restraint. The guitar lines were sharp, economical. No excess, no clutter. Whatever was coming on stage would depend on timing, not volume. The night of the performance, the crowd arrived primed for spectacle. The anchor detail was expectation, hits, solos, charisma. Prince delivered all of that early, then slowed the pace deliberately. By the time he reached the center of the set, the room had been conditioned to listen closely. That's when he stepped into the light and stopped speaking entirely. The microphone stayed unused. The anchor detail was visual now. Prince's eyes scanned the crowd once, then dropped to the guitar. He adjusted the strap, a small movement magnified by the silence. No one shouted. No one laughed. According to witnesses, the quiet wasn't awkward. It was tense, like the air before a storm that refuses to arrive. Minutes passed. The band remained frozen behind him, watching for a cue that didn't come. The anchor detail was trust. They didn't fill the space. They didn't test the moment. Prince had trained them not to. In an industry addicted to noise, this was defiance. The stakes were real. Lose the crowd here, and the night fractures. Break the spell too late, and the silence becomes indulgent. Prince stood perfectly still, measuring the room. The guitar cable lay unmoving at his feet, the instrument still mute. Whatever he chose to play next would define the silence retroactively, as genius or as miscalculation. The cultural context pressed in. Prince had always been judged as much for what he withheld as for what he gave. The anchor detail was history. Albums pulled from platforms, interviews declined, statements replaced by songs. He had long treated sound as language and silence as punctuation. This moment on stage wasn't an accident, it was grammar. Some in the audience later said they checked their watches. Others said they leaned forward without realizing it. The anchor detail was collective focus. Thousands of people synchronized not by beat, but by waiting. Prince had achieved what few performers ever do. He made stillness compelling. Behind the scenes, according to crew accounts, no one panicked. Lighting stayed fixed. No cues were advanced. This was part of the design. Prince had insisted on that flexibility. The silence was allowed to exist as long as it needed to. Then he moved, not to the microphone, to the guitar. His left hand slid up the neck. His right hand hovered for a fraction of a second over the strings. The anchor detail was microscopic, but electric. This was the edge. Whatever note came next would either justify everything that came before or collapse it. The room leaned in.
The next night, according to people who followed the tour closely, Prince adjusted nothing on the set list, but everything in the delivery shifted. The anchor detail was repetition. He returned to the same venue structure, the same lighting cues, the same guitar strapped across his chest. What changed was the tension in the room. Word had traveled. People were no longer waiting just for songs. They were waiting for the silence. At rehearsal that afternoon, Prince gave a single directive. Witnesses later recalled it wasn't a speech, just a gesture. He tapped the body of the guitar once, then raised a finger. One. That was it. The anchor detail was clarity. One line, one statement, no safety net. By showtime, the atmosphere had sharpened. The crowd noise before he came out was louder than the night before, almost defensive. Prince walked on stage dressed nearly identical to the previous performance, the guitar again hanging low. The anchor detail was continuity. This wasn't improvisation, this was structure. Midway through the set, he did it again. He stepped forward, centered himself beneath the lights, and let the microphone stand untouched. Silence fell faster this time. People recognized it. The anchor detail was memory. The audience understood they were inside a moment that demanded patience. From the wings, band members watched his hands. According to accounts, they weren't counting bars, they were reading body language. Prince's posture stayed loose, not rigid. He wasn't bracing, he was waiting. The guitar neck angled slightly upward, signaling intention without sound. This was leadership without words. The pressure was layered. There was the immediate risk of losing the room. There was the larger unspoken challenge to the industry narrative that demanded constant output and explanation. The anchor detail was the guitar itself, an instrument associated with virtuosity, now used as a symbol of restraint. Prince was reframing power. Someone in the crowd finally shouted his name. It echoed, then died. Prince didn't react. The anchor detail was refusal. He denied the call and response instinct that concerts rely on. This wasn't participation, this was observation. Then, at what multiple witnesses described as the exact wrong moment, when impatience was about to tip into discomfort, Prince moved his right hand. He didn't strum, he plucked a single note. The anchor detail was precision. One clean tone cut through the silence, hanging in the air longer because there was nothing around it. No chord, no rhythm, just pitch. The note wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. It landed like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had been forming for minutes. The crowd reacted instantly, gasps first, then cheers that swelled and crashed into each other. Prince didn't smile. He let the note fade completely before moving again. The anchor detail was patience enforced. He was teaching the room how to listen. He followed with a second note, higher this time, bending it slightly so it cried instead of rang. The guitar spoke without explanation. According to musicians who later analyzed it, the phrasing wasn't flashy. That was the point. The power came from placement, not speed. Behind him, the band stayed silent. Prince didn't cue them. This was still his space. The anchor detail was hierarchy reasserted, not through dominance, but through control. Every eye stayed locked on his hands. Over the next 30 seconds, he built a line that answered the silence retroactively. Each note explained why he had waited. The melody wasn't familiar, but it felt inevitable, as if it had been there all along, and the silence had simply cleared the path. This was the turning point object in action, the guitar transforming absence into meaning. People later described feeling embarrassed for doubting him, even briefly. The anchor detail was emotional reversal. The silence that had felt confrontational now felt generous, like he had trusted the audience enough to meet him there. As the line resolved, Prince finally nodded to the band. They entered softly, almost deferentially, filling the space he had carved out. The anchor detail was consequence. The silence had reordered the hierarchy of sound. Everything that followed existed in relation to that first note. Backstage after the show, according to crew members, no one spoke for a moment. They didn't need to. The anchor detail was recognition. Prince had communicated something fundamental without saying a word. Explanation is optional when command is absolute. But the full detonation of the title moment hadn't arrived yet, because the night that mattered most, the one people still talk about, was still ahead.
The night people still argue about happened later in the run, when the silence stopped being a surprise and became a test. Same artist, same guitar, but a different room. According to attendees, the venue was larger, the crowd louder, the expectations heavier. The anchor detail was scale. Prince walked out under brighter lights, the guitar strapped across his shoulder like a promise already made. Midway through the set, he reached the familiar spot. The microphone waited, the band froze. Prince stood still. This time, the silence stretched longer than before. Minutes, not seconds. You could feel the air change. People shifted in their seats, phones lowered. The anchor detail was duration. He wasn't asking for attention anymore. He was demanding endurance. Reports from the front rows describe Prince closing his eyes, not in meditation, but in dismissal. The crowd noise thinned into scattered coughs, a nervous laugh that died immediately. The anchor detail was isolation. Thousands of people present, and yet it felt like a private moment being imposed on everyone else. The stakes were clear. If he lost them now, he wouldn't just lose momentum, he would puncture the myth. Silence at this length could read as arrogance, or confusion, or failure. The anchor detail was risk, embodied in the stillness of his hands resting on the guitar strings. Then, without opening his eyes, Prince played. The first line was slower than before, lower. It crawled instead of soared. The anchor detail was choice. This wasn't about showing off, it was about grounding the room. Each note arrived exactly when the silence threatened to collapse, as if he were stitching the moment back together in real time. The reaction wasn't explosive at first, it was a collective exhale. You could hear it. The crowd released tension they hadn't realized they were holding. Prince kept his eyes closed, building the line patiently, letting Ben's cry just long enough to feel human. The guitar wasn't speaking over the silence now. It was translating it. When he finally opened his eyes, witnesses say he looked directly into the crowd, not scanning, fixing. The anchor detail was connection. The line he played next climbed upward, brighter, more defiant. It answered the unspoken question of the silence, why wait? Because this is what waiting makes possible. The band came in stronger this time, but still restrained. Prince led them with subtle movements of the guitar neck, no verbal cues. The anchor detail was authority without noise. Everything flowed from him. By the time the song resolved, the room was transformed. The same people who had fidgeted minutes earlier were now standing, shouting, some visibly shaken. Prince let the applause roll, but didn't bask in it. He stepped back, adjusted the strap on the guitar, and moved on. The anchor detail was dismissal. The point had already been made. The aftermath wasn't immediate headlines or viral clips. It spread the old way, through musicians talking to other musicians, through audience members trying to explain why it felt different. The anchor detail was memory. People didn't say he played an incredible solo. They said he waited, and then everything made sense. In the days that followed, commentators speculated. Some claimed it was a rebuke to short attention spans, others framed it as ego. Prince never clarified. The anchor detail was refusal to explain. Silence remained part of the statement. What changed was perception. That stretch of quiet became proof of something deeper. Prince didn't use sound to hold power, he used restraint. In an industry built on constant output, he demonstrated that withholding could be louder than amplification. The guitar line wasn't just music, it was punctuation. The thesis crystallized in hindsight. Prince wasn't silent because he lacked words. He was silent because he understood that mastery means choosing when not to speak. The anchor detail was the guitar itself, an instrument capable of endless noise, used instead to frame absence. Years later, fans still debate which note mattered most, the first, the bend, the resolve. But the truth sits earlier, in the minutes where nothing happened and everything was at stake. That was the real performance. Prince didn't explain himself with that guitar line. He proved that explanation was never required.